13 years ago, Tina Anderson was only a minor when she says she was raped and impregnated by this man, Ernie Willis, an adult member of her church. Then she says she was publicly shamed in front of hundreds of worshipers.
You felt like you were tainted?
Yeah. After you're, shunned and told that you should be stoned and put in front of the church, how would you not think that?
Father, I pray that
13 years later, Tina not only remained silent, never telling police, she remained deeply entrenched in the IFB Church, adhering to the instructions she says she learned from her pastors to forgive and forget.
All right, guys, there you go.
She married, had 3 children, and settled in Arizona, desperately trying to block out those dark memories.
I still struggle because I've been made to feel guilty for so long.
Nearly 3,000 miles away in Concord, New Hampshire, where those painful events took place in this church, these ex-members who witnessed Tina's humiliation still struggle with their own silence, their own guilt.
Explain why nobody spoke up for 13 years when they knew what had happened.
I have no answer for that because I have no excuse. I should have.
The whole culture is no, you don't question the ministry, you don't question the pastor. And it takes a while to figure out there's something really wrong here. This guy should be in prison.
By January 2010, Matt Barnhart had left the church.
It's kind of embarrassing to realize, hey, I was in a cult for about 15 years. Shame on me.
Haunted by what had happened to Tina Anderson, Barnhart finally broke his silence. He wrote a post on this Facebook website called the Independent Fundamental Baptist Cult Survivors, publicly revealing Tina's story for the first time. Jocelyn Zichterman, the IFB whistleblower who monitors the site, took immediate action.
And so I asked him, would you be willing to call the police with me, tomorrow morning? And he said yes.
I think I was just in complete shock. It came out of the blue.
In Arizona, 28-year-old Tina Anderson gets a call from a Concord, New Hampshire detective.
And did you tell him everything?
Yes.
Did you, for a moment, think, I don't want to press charges. I don't want to go back and open up this painful chapter in my past?
Yeah, I did.
But she says it was her husband who convinced her.
He's a former Marine, so he said, I'm going into Marine mode and let's fight this, and it's about time these people went down.
In May of last year, police arrested Ernie Willis and charged him with 2 counts of raping Tina Anderson and 2 counts of having sex with a minor. Tina still blames her former pastor, Chuck Phelps, for what she calls a cover-up.
Pastor Phelps certainly has a lot to answer for. I think at the very least he hid it from the church by the way he presented it, and I don't know that in his reporting with the police he was completely honest.
In written statements to 2020, Phelps describes Tina as having been in a covert dating relationship with a married man that became sexual in nature, and he claims he told police. Never does he use the words rape or sexual assault. Phelps's lawyer told 2020 that the pastor considered it consensual sex, even though Tina was a minor. So what exactly did Pastor Phelps tell police? He declined numerous requests for an on-camera interview, so we caught up with him at the IFB Church he now leads in Indianapolis.
In 1997, did you report that Tina Anderson had been raped to the police? You called it a dating relationship.
No, I did not.
Why wasn't it rape?
I did not call it that. I called it...
In your statement to us, you did call it a dating relationship.
Yes, I called it that in my statement to you because it was an ongoing relationship, but I did not call it that to the police department at the time.
Phelps denies that the church tried to cover up a crime, and he defends the decision to keep Tina's alleged attacker in the church.
First, I didn't know that he'd impregnated a 15-year-old girl. Remember, it was an accusation made. An accusation is not a conviction. It's not the responsibility of the church to close the doors to people who have real problems and issues, no matter how heinous. And so I think you'll find the community historically has always allowed heinous people under careful guidelines to be part of churches.
But that's not how Phelps's protege sees it.
If I'm going to obey this command...
Brian Fuller, the current pastor of Tina's former church, Trinity Baptist, claims he was shocked to learn what happened to her and to Ernie Willis.
Tina Anderson should have never stood before our congregation. She was a victim. She was a minor. Ernie Willis should have never been allowed to stay in this congregation after he confessed to this crime. The years following, it's outrageous that he remained here.
Both Fuller and Pastor Phelps blame the police for their lack of action.
No one ever followed up on the reports. Our law enforcement is supposed to arrest, is supposed to punish.
So the police, the Concord Police Department, dropped the ball.
They absolutely did. We've got a police force that 13 years ago were delinquent on their duties.
The Concord Police Department says it cannot comment on an ongoing case, but church critics say that what happened to Tina Anderson is part of a pattern of behavior among some IFB pastors who continue to blame the victim while allowing their perpetrators to remain active members of the church.
So you think Pastor Phelps should have warned the congregation about Ernie Willis?
If I were in this situation, he's not before our congregation. He's out the door.
You warn members of your congregation when there are sex offenders in their midst, correct?
That's right.
You have 2 registered sex offenders currently in your church. Do people in this congregation, do families with children here know that these men have been convicted and served time?
All of those things are accessible to them via the New Hampshire Sex Offenders website.
One of those sex offenders is Daniel Leaf, Tina's stepfather.
Daniel Leaf has repeatedly abused children. Don't you think other families here should be warned about that?
That's the great point.
Wouldn't you like to know before you sent your child to some sort of event that Daniel Leaf might be at, that he's been in prison a few times for abusing kids?
They're chaperoned. The people know where they're at, our security team, whenever they enter the building. So I'm very comfortable with that.
Comfortable allowing Leaf to remain in the choir alongside minors. That is, until last May, after Tina's case became public, and Leaf was no longer seen singing on Sundays.
So then I'll just look through Facebook and basically see what the activity is from overnight.
You think that Tina's story is basically the tip of the iceberg, and that police agencies, child welfare agencies haven't begun to connect the dots.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. It's never been exposed. It's taken a long time to get a community of people all rallied together with the boldness to go forward together.
Including Tina Anderson, who now calls the IFB a cult.
I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me?
Last summer, she and her husband left their IFB church.
You've had to walk away from friends, schools, communities, job.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big umbilical cord.
It's been tough. You feel kind of lonely.
Her closet is still full of conservative IFB dresses.
A lot of what's in my closet I will probably never wear again.
As she awaits the trial of Ernie Willis, who has pleaded not guilty and declined to speak with 2020, Tina Anderson says she has not abandoned God or her faith. She is embracing her new life, her new clothes, and she hopes a new church.
We got a new life in the light of your love.
My relationship with God is fine. I'm not mad at God.
And what will you tell your children about this chapter of your life and the lessons you learned?
I would just say, you know, Mommy went through a time where some bad people did some tough things, but we've made it through, and God is still good.